Hello students, welcome to the discussion on the CSAT paper of UPSC Prelims 2025. So many students were asking me about the analysis of CSAT and also how tough the paper was. So what do you think? How was the paper? Was it tough, moderate, easy, manageable? So I think the paper was moderate, but I would not say it's too tough. And I would also say that it was moderate if you were either underprepared or unprepared. But if you were prepared properly, it would have been manageable. And if you had practiced enough, it would have been easy also. Right? So it boils down to the practice, the number of questions that you've solved before the exam, the kind of marks that you're practicing, and also how you're understanding the paper itself, the mindset of the examiner, what sort of patterns are being repeated. All of these put together will bring you from this level of toughness to this one. And this is exactly what we did with the high impact revision program at R.C.Reddy IAS study circle for the last 2 years for many batches. And in fact, by the end of the session, you'll realize that there are many questions that you have actually solved in the HIR program. At the same time, some of the questions were also predicted beforehand using not by some magical power, but using the patterns of the UPSC paper in the last 3 to 4 years. 21, 22, 23 and 24 papers, they give us ample evidence as to what is being expected by the examiner from the candidate and how we can prepare ourselves to give a better performance in the exam according to the demand of the exam. Okay, so we'll look into that. But before that, let me give you a quick introduction about me. My name is Surya Teja. I have been teaching CSAT in R.C.Reddy IAS study circle for some time now. And in the UPSC 2024 exam, I was recommended with a rank of 799, and before that I was recommended for Indian Forest Service with a rank of 66. Okay, so CSAT is something that I really like, and since my option is also mathematics and I've been associated with this subject for a long time now, which is why I guide candidates with respect to this particular topic. So let's look at the CSAT paper 2025 and let's see how you could have solved these questions easily by using the analysis and the patterns that we noticed in the earlier papers. And also, I'll keep giving you pointers as to how you can improve your performance for the next cycle and how to ensure that CSAT would not be a barrier, particularly in your prelims paper. And if you notice, among all the 3 stages of UPSC civil services exam, prelims, mains and interview, the bigger barrier is prelims, and even in that, CSAT particularly has become a tougher barrier in the last 3 to 4 years. So let's see how we can manage this paper. I know that many people are saying this is a tougher paper, moderate to tough paper. I do agree to a certain extent, but again, preparation will always bring down the level of toughness. So let's start looking at questions one by one. And for the sake of this discussion, I've taken the set A. Okay, so this is the set A, and let's start solving questions. The first passage is talking about an ecosystem to conserve biodiversity, and it's also talking about the commercial potential of livelihoods, deforestation, the communities living in those ecosystems, and also the livelihoods. I hope you read this passage already. So let's look at the question and notice that this year in CSAT, most of the questions were either critical message or crux or meaning, central idea, correct? And also assumption based questions were asked, but we did not see many questions. In fact, I don't think there was any question on the consequences or inferences that you draw out of the passage. And if you remember any passage based questions, if this is a passage, there will be some foreground and background. Here you would have assumptions, and here you would have inferences. So he focused on these two parts particularly for this cycle of the exam. So let's get back to this question. Here he asked for the critical message of the passage. Now look at the options. If you notice, many options had extreme words. For instance, look at this. Is not an issue to be worried about. That's not what the passage is talking about. It's certainly talking about conservation of biodiversity. Here he's saying it goes against the fundamental rights of people. That again is not something that's talked about in the passage. And here he said it should be completely stopped. That's again an extreme thing to say given the context of the passage. So again I want to draw your attention to this thing, that is context of the passage. The context of the passage is always important for you to get to the right answer in passage based questions. So here, based on the context, A, B and D were all extremes, and this was the only one that fits the passage consistently. Sustenance of livelihood and degradation of ecosystem while being together exacerbate one another, leading to conflicts and imbalance. And if you notice, you'll find that word of balance in the passage itself. Okay? So the answer for this question was C. Here you could have either used the passage to arrive at the answer, or you could have simply eliminated those statements which had extreme wording based on the context of the question. Let's look at the next question. So here he is asking for the assumptions that are based on the passage, the assumptions that have been made. Again, look at this. Again, you'll see that there are extreme words, extreme statements that are given in this question. No country needs to depend on ecosystems to boost national income. I don't think that's what the passage is talking about. He's not talking about no country or country depending on the ecosystem, but he's talking about ecosystem development and sustainable development, the balance between all of these. Resource-rich countries need to share their resources with those of scant resources so as to prevent the degradation of ecosystems. Again, he is not talking about resource-rich nations versus resource-poor nations, but is simply talking about the balance that has to be maintained between ecosystems, development, conservation, and livelihoods of the communities living in that ecosystem. So, both of them were not the right assumptions. To check, and how do we check if an assumption is right for a passage? What we do is we take the assumption, we assume that it is true, and if it is true, is it consistent with the passage? Here we'll notice that both the statements are not consistent with the passage. Hence both of them are wrong, and the answer is neither one nor two. Correct? So here, this was a fairly simple question, and if you were given the set A, I think it would have been a very good start to start off with these two questions. So let's look at the other questions. Now this is another passage. Here the passage is talking about okay. So here this question is again asking about the assumptions. Okay, looks like this is the fourth question. There must have been a question earlier. This is the third question. Yes, again it's talking about the central idea. So, just like the first passage, this passage is also based on central idea and assumption. Now let's look at the central idea. He's talking about economies of scale is essential for transition. Okay. And the second one is saying modern technological process is intensely linked to path dependent innovations. I don't think he's talking about technological progress, and intensely linked is something too extreme to talk about given the context of the passage. Then again, countries with large economies are in a better position. He did not say that. All he said is, you need to have a good start, and as you keep doing more and more of a particular thing, you will get better at it. That's what he's talking about. He's not saying large economies would directly give an advantage with respect to renewable energy. And timing plays a crucial role in the case of green technology development. Here, essential again is a very extreme thing to say. He's not saying economies of scale are essential. He's saying economies of scale would help in a smoother transition. That's the only thing he's saying. He's not saying that without economies of scale, you would not have a transition to green growth. Right? A is talking about economies of scale being essential. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying economies of scale is one of the things that you would want to focus on if you want a better transition to green growth. So A, B and C do not give the central idea of the passage. And D is the one that talks about the central idea. He's saying timing plays a very crucial role. And that's exactly what he's talking about. The earlier you start, see here, he's talking about moving early. Early mover advantage. So if you move early, you start early, then you're going to do better in terms of moving from the current energy system to a renewable, greener system, and that transition would be smooth. So the central idea here is D. Okay, let's look at the next question, and that was based on assumptions. Now again, let's read the assumptions and try to fit it with the passage. If they're consistent, then that is right. Otherwise, it is not. Path-dependent green investments will eventually most likely benefit growth as well as public finances in a country like India. If other green technologies follow the same pattern, as that of solar energy, there will most likely be an easy green transition. He's asking about the valid assumptions. First of all, look at this one. Other green technologies following the same pattern of solar energy. That's not something that is being talked about in the passage. That is not even the assumption. The background of this passage has got nothing to do with either solar energy or other forms of renewable energy. All he's saying is, you need to have a better start, you need to have economies of scale, and you need to learn by doing. So that is how you can ensure a smooth transition to green growth. So this is not something that's talked about. Solar energy is just an example. He has given solar energy only to support the argument in the passage. Otherwise, solar energy has got nothing to do with what he's talking about. It's just an evidence. If you notice, it's just an evidence for his argument of getting better by doing economies of scale and learning by doing. So this is wrong. And the first one, path-dependent green investments will eventually most likely benefit growth as well as public finances in a country like India. So that is valid because he had talked about path-dependent investments in the first half of the passage, and if this is put together with the passage, path-dependent investments for a country like India will certainly benefit the growth, because he's talking about growth here, and he's also talking about public finances because he's talking about costs, lowering the costs, and also achieving economies of scale. Economies of scale is, what does that mean? If you produce more and more, you will be incurring lower and lower costs in terms of production. The cost of production goes down by with the amount of goods that are produced. The more number of goods you produce, the lesser the cost. So that is economies of scale. And that this statement fits very well with the passage, which means this is a valid assumption, and hence A should be the answer. That is one only, because the second statement is not a valid assumption. So these passages do look a little tougher in terms of the questions of assumptions, but if you can carefully analyze what is given in the passage and stick to the context of the passage, like we discussed in our HIR program and other classes, context of the passage becomes a guiding light for you in terms of solving comprehension based questions. So let's look at the next question. Alright, again I was so happy to see this question, because this is exactly what we discussed in the class in the HIR program. In all the batches we have talked about it, and in fact some of my students have actually messaged me saying that they were happy to see questions like this. You'll see more and more questions of this sort, the ones that we have discussed in the class, and also some kind of patterns that we have noticed already based on the last 4 to 5 years of question papers. And this is one such question. Here he is asking about a natural number n that can be expressed as n equal to p plus q plus r, where p, q, r are distinct factors of n. Distinct factors of n, which can also be written as product of those factors. In the class we talked about the famous triplet of 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3 are such three numbers whose sum is equal to 6, and each of these are also the factors of that sum, that is 6. So 6 is the key starting material for this problem. So 6, if you knew this triplet and 6, then you already got the answer for this question. Now look at, now let's say 6 equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3, right? So p plus q plus r equal to n can be written in this way: 6 equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3, where 1, 2 and 3 are also the distinct factors of 6. So we got one such n, and we got one set of p, q and r. Now let's look at the multiples of 6. Let's look at the second one, that is 12. 6 into 2 is 12, and I'll multiply each of these with 2. 2 plus 4 plus 6. You notice that this is again one combination of n, p, q and r, where n equal to p plus q plus r, and each of these is a factor of n. 2 is a factor of n, 12, 4 is a factor of 12, 6 is also a factor of 12. So you'll notice that 6 and multiples of 6 are the possible values of n, where n can be written as sum of its factors. So we just have to go for the other multiples. 6 3s are 18. Again this would become 3 plus 6 plus 9. Again if you would want to cross verify this, you can do it. You'll see that each of these three numbers would be a factor of 18. So similarly we can go for the other multiples of 6, and he's asking for the number of such numbers n which are less than 50. If you notice, you have 6, 12 and so on up to 48 that are less than 50. That is, the multiples of 6 less than 50 are up to 48, and 48 is nothing but 6 times 8. In other words, we have 8 multiples of 6 that are below 50, and all these multiples of 6 have this property. So how many numbers do we have below 50 that have this property? That is nothing but 8. So the answer for this question is 8. Now here, this is something that we noticed based on a question, I think in 2022, a similar question was asked. In one of the statements, he talked about a set of 3 numbers which follow this property. So this property is something that is a repetitive pattern in terms of CSAT PYQs. Again, this was discussed in the HIR program, and if you knew the number 6, it was very easy to arrive at the answer. Otherwise, this question would have been it would have looked tough at least, or it would have taken time, both of which would be a problem for exam, because we have limited time, and also toughness of any question would only build pressure in the exam situation. So knowing 6 would have been a great help, and the answer for that was 8. Let's look at the next question. Again, prime numbers. Prime numbers is something that has become the favorite of the examiner in the recent past. There are many questions that are framed on the prime numbers, not just in the 25 paper, but also the papers from 2020 to 2024. So recent 4 to 5 years have lots of questions on prime numbers, and it's always better to remember prime numbers and their properties. That would be very helpful in terms of solving the questions. Now let's look at the question. 3 prime numbers P, Q and R, each less than 20, are such that P minus Q equal to Q minus R. How many distinct possible values can we get for P plus Q plus R? Okay. So the answer here was 5. Let's look at how we arrive at 5. Now first of all, these are 3 prime numbers which are less than 20. So let's list down the prime numbers that are less than 20. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17 and 19. So these are the prime numbers that are less than 20. So P, Q and R should come from these numbers. Now this is the property that exists between P, Q and R. In other words, this is nothing but the property of an arithmetic progression. Why? Because the difference between PQ is equal to the difference between Q and R. So let's try to find numbers from this set, 3 numbers from this set, such that the difference between any 2 numbers is the same. Let's make a list of these numbers. Can we say this is one such triplet? We can, because he's not saying that P, Q and R are distinct. He's just giving P, Q and R. He's asking for the distinct possible values of P plus Q plus R. He's not asking for distinct P, Q and R, but he's asking for distinct values of P plus Q plus R. So this is one possibility. Similarly, 3 is one possibility. Similarly, I could take 3 5s, 7, 11, 13, 17 and 19. So these are those triplets in which all 3 P, Q and R are equal, and also notice that P minus Q is 0, Q minus R is 0 in all the triplets. So P minus Q equal to Q minus R is also satisfied. Now let's look at other triplets. Now can I have a difference of 1? If 2 and 3 differ by 1, can I find another prime, another set of 2 primes, another prime number that differs from 3 by 1? We cannot, right? So the minimum difference is 2. So let's look at those triplets that have a difference of 2. 3, 5, 7 is 1. Can I have 5, 7 and anything else? We cannot. Can I have 11, 13 and anything else? No. So the difference of 2 I think is explored already. Now let's look at the difference of 4. 3, 7, 11 is one possibility. 11, 13 and 17 is another possibility. Here the difference between 3, 5 is 2, 5, 7 is 2. Here the difference is 4 and 4, 4 and 4. Now let's look at other differences. Can we have a difference of 6? Yes, there seems to be one triplet. 5, 11 and 17. And we also have 7, 13 and 19. And we do not have any other triplet. Let's look at the common difference of 8. We'll see if we can find a triplet that has common difference of 8. 3, 11 and 19 is one such triplet. So these are all the triplets which satisfy this property of P minus Q equal to Q minus R, where P, Q and R are prime numbers which are less than 20. These are all the triplets that we have. Yes. So now he is asking for the distinct possible values of the sum P plus Q plus R. Now let's start listing the values of P plus Q plus R. In this case, the value is 6. Here it is 9, 15, 21, 33, 39. This is 51 and 57. Now 3 plus 5 plus 7 is 15. We already got a 15. We are only looking for the distinct possible values. So I will not list down 15 again because I already got a 15 earlier. 3 plus 7 plus 11 is how much? That is 21. We already got a 21 here. So I am not listing that down again. 11 plus 13 plus 17 is, how much is that? Okay, this is not a triplet because here the difference is 11 and 13 is 2, 13 and 17 is 4. So that is not a triplet that satisfies the condition. Now let's look at this triplet, 5 plus 11 plus 17. That is 33 and we already have a 33. So I'm not including that again. 7, 13 and 19. The sum is 39 and I already have a 39. So I'm not going for that. 3, 11 and 19. Again the sum would be 33 and I already have a 33. So I'm not listing that down again. Okay. So how many values do I have? How many distinct values do I have for P plus Q plus R? I'll simply count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So I have 8 distinct possible values of P plus Q plus R which satisfy this condition. So the answer should be what? This. Again, here the question would seem lengthy. It certainly was lengthy to a certain extent. But again, as we keep talking about in our class and other programs, CSAT is all about selecting the right question and figuring out the answer as fast as you can and getting 2.5 marks and moving ahead. So ideally you should have either solved this question somewhere in the first hour, towards the end of the first hour, or if it was too lengthy for you, you would have skipped it. But otherwise, we did talk about a lot on these prime numbers, and also we remember all the prime numbers up to 100. So using that, solving for this condition and getting the distinct possible values wasn't tough. So if you could spend at least 2 to 3 minutes on this question, you could have arrived at an answer which was safe without errors. Let's move to the next question. Yes. Again, this is something that we talked about in the class. Here again he is talking about 3 values P, Q and R three numbers P, Q and R, and is asking for the number of values of P plus Q plus R, and the condition that is imposed on P, Q and R is this: 1 by P plus 1 by Q plus 1 by R is 1. And these numbers need not be distinct. These numbers need not be distinct. That should give you some hint to start the problem. If let's say they're not distinct, if let's say all of them were equal, that means P equal to Q equal to R. That means this equation becomes what? 3 by P equal to 1, or in other words, P equal to 3, and P equal to Q equal to R. That means 3 comma 3 comma 3 is one triplet that satisfies this condition, and it's also that triplet where all 3 P, Q and R are equal. So that is one triplet. Now none is ruled out because you already have one value of P plus Q plus R, that is P plus Q plus R equal to 3 plus 3 plus 3, that is 9. Now let's see if we can find out any other triplet that satisfies this condition. Now let's say two of them are equal and the other one is not. Okay, let's consider this triplet 2, 4 and 4. 1 by 2 plus 1 by 4 plus 1 by 4 is equal to how much? 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2, that is equal to 1. So 2, 4, 4 is also one triplet that satisfies the given condition, that is 1 by P plus 1 by Q plus 1 by R is 1. So another possible value for P plus Q plus R is 2 plus 4 plus 4, that is 10. Now can we find anything else? Now again this is also ruled out. We ruled out none and 1 earlier. So the answer should be between these two. Okay, we already arrived at a 50% probability situation where you either choose between C or D. Now again I want to remind you this triplet 1, 2 and 3. This is a magical triplet that we talked about, and this again would give you a hint for this question. You need to find triplets that are that can satisfy a condition like this and that are very close to each other, because if they were very far away, this condition would not be possible. So similar like 1, 2, 3, similar to 1, 2, 3, we also discussed about triplets like 2, 3, 6, and we also talked about other triplets where the sum and product follow a certain pattern. We talked about those triplets, and 1, 2, 3 and 2, 3, 6 are certain triplets that we talked about. Now look at 2, 3 and 6. 1 by 2 plus 1 by 3 plus 1 by 6. This 1 by 3 plus 1 by 6 is equal to how much? This would be nothing but 2 by 6 plus 1 by 6. That would be 3 by 6 or 1 by 2. We have a 1 by 2 already, and 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2 is 1. So 2, 3, 6 is another triplet which is satisfying this condition, and whose sum is 2 plus 3 plus 6, that is 11. And you cannot find any other triplet that satisfies this condition, P, Q and R satisfying 1 by P plus 1 by Q plus 1 by R equal to 1. So these are the only three triplets, and they have three distinct values of P plus Q plus R. So the answer should be C, that is 3. So let's look at the next question. Yes, again this is a pattern that we talked about. This is using the topic of calendar and sequences and series together. Notice that this is one new pattern in the UPSC CSAT that was introduced in 2025. where they're mixing 2 to 3 topics together to frame questions. So let's see how we can use the knowledge of sequences and series, and also sequences and series and calendars together to solve this question. So January plus 12 months. 12 months from January is nothing but January again. If you add 12 to January, that would be January again. That is the 12th month. The 12th month after January would be January again. January of next year. It's like saying if January of 2025 is the first one, if I go 12 months after that, the 12th month after this 2025 January would be 2026 January. Okay, so we are going 12 months ahead. Now again, the second one, Jan plus 11 months ahead would be nothing but December. So you notice that this is going 1 downwards. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8 and so on. Again, December plus 10 months. 10th month after December would be the October of next. The October of next year. So this would be October of next year. Similarly, I add 9 now to October. That would be how many? 9. That means after October I have November and December in that year. Remove 2 and you need 7 months in the next year. And 7th month in the next year would be July. Now July plus 8. Right, July plus 8. Again you remove 5 months after July, because July is the 7th month of an year. You remove 5 because 7 plus 5 is 12. You remove 5 and then the 3rd month in the next year would be March. Then you add 7 to March. The 3rd month plus 7, that becomes 10, and that is nothing but October of that year. Then October plus 6 would be nothing but, you take away 2 months from that year, November and December, and then the 4th month, because after taking 2 you are left with 4. The 4th month in the next year would be April. So this is Y and X was July. So X and Y are nothing but July and April. So B is your answer. And you just have to use the knowledge of the numbers that we give for months in a calendar. And using those numbers, you just have to observe a pattern that is consistent across all these numbers given for these months. It was a fairly simple question. You just had to be calm and composed to understand that it is nothing but the pattern of numbers given to any month in a calendar. So this again brings us the importance of, it talks to us about the importance of being calm in the exam hall. So being calm itself is a huge tool in your at your disposal that could help you get a very good score in both CSAT, GS, Prelims, Mains and even the interview stage. So that is something that we have to practice, and that again is a mindset that we usually talk about. But anyway, let's get back to CSAT, solving the paper of CSAT 2025. So let's look at the 9th question. He's talking about a cricket match where the first team X scored 20 runs in n overs. So let's look at the situation of X. They scored n runs in 20 overs. Let's look at the situation of Y. He's saying the team Y tied the score in 10% less overs. That means they also scored N, but they took only 90% of the overs that X had taken. That is 90% of 20, that is 18 overs. And what is the run rate here? N by 18. That means to finish N runs in 18 overs, you need N by 18 runs on an average every over to finish N runs totally. Now he's saying if the average run rate, that is N by 18, was 50% higher. To convert percentage to fraction, what we do is N by 8 into 50% is nothing but this becoming 150% times, that is 3 by 2 times, or 150 by 100 times. This is nothing but 3 by 2 times, and if you solve it, that becomes, let's say this is 50 times 3, 50 times 2, and 3 times 6, so this becomes N by 12. So this run rate, the new run rate, that is 50% higher than the original run rate, that would be N by 12. So he's saying if the run rate was 50% higher, they would have finished in 12 overs. Now notice this, you just had to finish N runs, and if the run rate was N by 12, you would finish it in 12 overs anyway, irrespective of what the value of N is. So the value of N is not significant here. N could be 100 or 200 or 300, or it could be any value, yet this entire thing is valid irrespective of that value. So that means the value of N is not significant and the given statement is valid always. That means this data is not enough for you to figure out the value of N. The given data will not lead you to the value of N. That means this cannot be solved or determined using the data that is given. Why? Because this is consistent for any value of N. Now to find out N, you would need some other piece of information or some other equation that has to be put into the question statement, and that was not done. So just using this information you cannot arrive at the answer for the value of N. Hence the answer should be D in that question. Now again, this is one question that looks very tough. Look at this, look at the options itself. It's talking about 10 power 8, 10 power 4, p, k square, whole square. That itself it scares you away from the question, right? But you'll notice that this is an extremely easy question, and it could be solved just within 20 to 30 seconds, giving you 2.5 marks straight away. Let's carefully look at the question. The price P of commodity is increased by k percent. And whenever we increase something by k percent, what we do is we multiply that with 1 plus k by 100. And similarly, when we decrease something by k percent, what we do is we multiply that with 1 minus k by 100. Why are we doing it in succession? Because the price originally was P. It was increased by, forget about this for a moment, it was increased by k percent. That means it becomes P times 1 plus k by 100. Now k percent decrease is calculated on this entire value and not just P, which means you have to take 1 minus k by 100 and multiply it with entire value of P into 1 plus k by 100, which is why we took both of them together. So let's write that down. A first increase of k percent and then a decrease of k percent. Now again it's increased by k percent. So which means I have to take k percent of this and add that to this. That becomes again what? You need to multiply with another 1 plus k by 100. Since I'm multiplying another one, I'll just take a square here. And similarly, when they're decreasing again by k percent, I just have to multiply with another 1 minus k by 100, and that becomes 1 minus k by 100 whole square. And now this is equal to q. So I have established the equation based on the information that's given between P and Q. All I have to do is simplify this carefully to convert it into this format and identify which option is valid. So I'll do it very carefully, because here I'm looking at the powers of 10 and any mistake would entirely change the equation entirely. So I'll be very careful here. P, this becomes what? 100 plus K whole square, 100 minus K whole square, divided by, I have 100 inside, but when I take it outside, that becomes what? 100 square. That is how many zeros? 2 zeros in 100 square. So 10 power 4. Here also I have a 10 power 4. So that becomes 10 power 8 in the denominator. I bring that to the left hand side. Q into 10 power 8 equal to P. If I put square on both of them together, I notice that this is nothing but a plus b into a minus b. That becomes a square minus b square. So again 100 square would become what? 10 power 4 minus k square. But do not forget this square, which means 10 power 4 minus k square whole square. P into 10 power 4 minus k square whole square is equal to Q into 10 power 8. That is nothing but the option A. So option A is the answer for this one. Just notice that this was a very, very simple question. All you need to know or remember was the percentages. Increase in percentage is nothing but a multiplication by a factor of 1 plus k by 100. Decrease is a multiplication of 1 minus k by 100. So that brings us to the option A. Okay, this is another passage based question. If you read the passage, it's talking about the challenges based on the global warming and also the emissions, its impact and how it has to be tackled. Now again he's asking about the logical, rational and pragmatic message. It's nothing but the central idea of the passage. So look at this. The mitigation and adaptation strategies to address yes. So the mitigation and adaptation strategies to address is essentially the responsibility of each state, is not the crux of the passage. He is not talking about this being the responsibility of each state. Similarly, India is too diverse to implement any effective strategy is not talked about in the passage. He is not talking about the diversity of India. He is just saying India has different parts to it and different parts would need different strategies and they would have different problems. But it's not saying it's too diverse to implement any strategy at all. Then again, this is very similar. He's saying basically the responsibility of central government or union government. Again, that's not what he's talking about. He's not pinning responsibility on either the state government or the union government. India needs to formulate effective climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies at the state, region or region level. That is what he's talking about. He's saying you need to go to the level of a region or a state to understand the problems that arise based on the geography of any particular state, and using that knowledge or awareness you can develop a strategy to tackle the problem of global warming or climate change. So that reflects the meaning of the passage. Hence the option here, the right option here should be D. Again, assumptions and meaning is what he talked about mostly in almost all of the passages in the 25 exam. So let's look at the assumptions that were made here. Green energy production can be linked to or integrated with climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. Did he talk about green production? Yes, he talked about green production. Yes, because he talked about green production here, green energy production, that is wind power towards the end of the passage. So this is a valid assumption. He's saying effects of climate change are much more severe in one particular area than others. He did not say that. He said the problem would manifest differently in different areas, but he did not talk about the severity or intensity of the problem. So B is not a valid assumption, so A should be the answer for this one. Okay, looks like we do not have the passage for this question. Let me quickly read out the passage. Yes, he's talking about, let me read out the passage for you. If the social inequality is the most acutely felt social problem in India, insecurity more than poverty is the most acutely felt economic problem. Besides those below the official poverty line, even those just over the poverty line are subject to multiple economic insecurities of various kinds. Many government policies are actually intended towards mitigation of these insecurities. So he talked about poverty being one of the problems, and insecurity more than poverty is a problem for a country like India. So he's asking about the message that's conveyed in the passage. So notice that India's political executive should be aware. That is not the central idea. He's not saying that India's political executive should be aware. He's just talking about two problems, that is poverty and social inequality. So this is not the crux of the passage. Again, poverty is the prime reason for social inequality and insecurity. That again is not being talked about. Poverty and social inequality are so intricately linked that they pose an unmanageable crisis. This is too extreme to be connected to the passage. This is just not close to what the passage is talking about. Now look at the last one. Insecurity more than poverty is the main economic issue that government policies must address. He did talk about poverty as an issue, but he said insecurity is a bigger issue, which is why this fits perfectly with what is being talked about in the passage. So the answer for that was D. Again, he's asking for the assumptions. So people above the poverty line also are prone to suffer from anxiety about economic insecurity. Yes, he did talk about people above poverty line suffering from economic insecurity. He said that is also a problem. Poverty is one problem, but beyond that there is another problem of insecurity. So this seems to be valid. Eradication of poverty can result in peace and social equality. He did not talk about eradicating poverty, nor did he talk about peace in the country. He simply said poverty is one problem, but there's a bigger problem of insecurity. So this is not consistent with that's not consistent with the passage. That means the answer should be A. Let's look at the next question. Again, the question on cubes and dice. We have solved many such questions in the HIR program. And The minimum number of cuts is again something that we talked about, and to get 60 smaller pieces, we have to find a dimension where the product of the length, breadth and height would give us 60, and based on that we decide the number of cuts that we need to make. So to have 60 cubes, the minimum number of the most optimal dimension size is 3 by 4 by 5. That means 3 along one dimension, 3 smaller cubes along one dimension, 4 along another and 5 along the third dimension. So totally you would have 3 times 4 is 12, 12 times 5 is 60. And the number of cuts to get a dimension of n is nothing but n minus 1. So for 3 we would need 2 cuts. To get a dimension of 4 we would need 3 cuts, and to get a dimension of 5 we would need 4 cuts. So totally we would need a minimum of 9 cuts to get 60 smaller cubes. So statement 1 is right. Now the number of cubes that are not painted on any face, that is done by taking the product of a minus 2, b minus 2 and c minus 2, where a, b, c are nothing but the dimensions of the cube. So here a, b, c are 3, 4, 5. Take 2 away from all of them, that becomes 1 into 2 into 3, that is nothing but 6. So the number of smaller pieces without any face colored is 6. That means both of them are right. This was a very easy question. All you had to remember was how we cut a bigger cube into smaller cubes and how to get a minimum number for that cutting to get a cube of specific dimension. Again this question, this again is based on cubes and squares and cubes. This is not the cubes that we saw earlier, the number of cuts question, but this is cubes of numbers, that is a number raised to the power 3. So we talked about squares and cubes. So here again notice that 7 square plus 24 square equals to 25 square. Similarly, 12 square plus 16 square is equal to 20 square. So he's asking us for 16 and that symbol and 63, that would be nothing but finding a number that whose square is 16 square plus 63 square. So you just have to find a number, the sum of whose squares is 16, this square of which is the sum of squares of 16 and 63. This would be 4225, and in options there is only one number that ends in 5 whose square could be something that ends in 5, or otherwise 65 square would be nothing but write it 25. 6 times 7 becomes 42. That would be the square of 65. So 65 is the answer for this question. So again this question is based on percentages. Let's start reading the question. The petrol price shot up by 10% and the price of the petrol before hike was. So let's do a before and after analysis for this situation. Before, the price was 90 rupees and a person travels 2200 kilometers and his mileage was 16. So he needed 2200 by 16 number of liters of petrol, and each liter costs 90 rupees. So this is the total amount that is spending on petrol every month. Now if he wants to maintain this expenditure, that has to be equal to the new expenditure that he incurs in the period of 1 month. But here the problem is the price of petrol has shot up by 10%. So 10% of 90 is 99. Now he has to reduce his travel by some kilometers. So let's say the new distance traveled is D, and the mileage does not change because he is using the same car or bike. which means it is still 16. So these two values should be equal. So try to cancel out the common things. 16, 9 times 11, 9 times 10, 11 times 200. That means D equal to 10 times 200, that is 2000. So with this situation, after the hike in the price, he can only travel for 2000 kilometers if he wants to have the same expenditure. That means instead of 2200, he can only travel 2000. That means he has to travel 200 kilometers lesser. So the answer should be B here. Okay. Again, this is slightly lengthier because okay, this is not lengthy, sorry. This is asking for a 4-digit number n, which when divided by 3, 5, 6, 9 leaves a remainder 1, 3, 4 and 7. So what you can do is, you can look at the options and try to figure out an answer just by adding that remainder to one of the options and dividing that with 3, 5, 6 and 9 respectively. Or you can go for the method where you say that n is nothing but 3k plus 1 and 5p plus 3 and so on. But otherwise, you can notice that these two options are very similar. So we'll try to figure out if either this one or this one is right. So let's see, we'll add 1 to 1078, that becomes 1079. We need to subtract 1 because n equal to 3k plus 1, so we need to subtract 1. That becomes what? 1077. And if you use the divisibility test for 3, 1 plus 7 is 15, which is divisible by 3. So 1077 is divisible by 3. Similarly, you subtract 3 from 1078, that becomes 1075. That's again divisible by 5. And you take away 4 from 1078, that becomes 1074. And you'll notice that that is divisible by 2 and 3. And similarly, you take away 9, that becomes 1069. And that again would be divisible by 9. So 1078 is that number which leaves these remainders when divided by these divisors. So the answer should be 1078. Okay, let's look at the next question. In questions like these, we notice that using counter examples, using examples to prove and disprove the statement would give us the answer. So he's saying, given this condition, would B always be greater than E? Since we are only concerned about B and E, let's look at B greater than C less than D greater than E. So I'll just try to give a value for values for B, C, D and E that would be that give me the opposite situation of B being greater than E. That means I need to have B less than E. So what I can do is, I'll give values of 8, 1, 10 and 9. Notice that 8 is greater than 1. Similarly, 1 is less than 10 and 10 is greater than 9. But notice that 8 and 9, 8 is not greater than 9. Instead of 8, if I took 12, this inequality would be valid, but 12 would be greater than 9. So B greater than E is not always true. Similarly, if you look at this second statement, we are talking about S and V, so we'll be worrying about only that part of the inequality. S equal to T less than or equal to U equal to V. So again, let me give values for this. This 10 equal to 10 and let's say U is 50. Again the inequality holds, but S is less than 50 here. So you can say that S is less than 50. S is less than V. But similarly, I can give other values like I've given in the statement 1, where I would have S greater than V. Or I would have S equal to V. Let's say instead of giving 10 and 10 here, if I gave 50 is less than or equal to 50 because I have an equality sign there, and I have 50 for V. S and V are both 50 together, but S is not less than V. That means S is not always less than V. So this is also wrong. So the answer should be D. Let's go to the next question. Again here, he's asking about the unit digit when you multiply 1357 up to 999. So it's nothing but the remainder that you get when you divide this entire thing with 9. So let's look at the remainder. For 1357 and 9, it's nothing but 1357 and 9. And after 9 you will have what? 11. When you divide 11 with 10, you will have a remainder of 1 again. Similarly for 13 you will have 3. For 15, 5, 17, 7, 19, 9. So I'll keep having sets of reminders of 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9 even until 999. How many such sets would I have? How many sets of 10 do I have in 1000? I have 100. 1000 by 10 is 100. So here I would have this 100 times, and I just need to get the remainder of this number when I divide that with 10. Now I'll quickly do a multiplication inside the brackets. That is 3 times 5 is 15, 105. 105 multiplied by 9 is 945, and I'm raising it to the power 100, and I want the units digit of that number. And notice that this is nothing but a number that ends in 5, and any power of such number ending in 5 will always end in 5. The units digit of any power of 945 will always be 5. That means the units digit of this entire thing or the remainder here are 5. So the answer should be C. Okay, let's look at this passage. He's talking about the realities of agriculture sector, that it has never experienced a high growth phase. The highest decadal growth for agriculture has been 3.5%, and that was a stagnation after 1980s. So again he's asking for the corollary here, right? Let's look at the options. Green revolution was not as useful as it was expected to be. He's not talking about green revolution. India lagged behind other countries in adapting mechanized and modern farming. India lagged behind other countries is not the problem here. He's not talking about the pace at which India has adopted mechanized farming or modern farming. So this is also wrong. Rural to urban migration is not talked about in the passage. He's not talking about the migration problem of the agricultural sector, but he's talking about how the agricultural sector has grown in the last few decades. So the benefit of economic reforms percolates slowly to the agricultural sector in comparison to other sectors. That's what he talked about. He talked about the comparison between agriculture and non-agricultural sectors. So answer here should be A. Now he's talking about the assumptions here. Again the same passage. The growing divergence could have been reduced by adapting large-scale cultivation of commercial crops in corporate farming. He did not talk about this. That does not fit with the problem that was talked about in the passage. Providing free insurance subsidies, no, that is not there that is not an assumption that works well with the context of the passage. So this is also wrong. He's not talking about subsidies. So the answer is neither neither 1 nor 2. Now this question is based on handlooms being a culture equated with a culture that ensures continuity of tradition. Tradition as a single linear entity is strongly contested. We are promoting handloom as a traditional industry. It is not surprising that large sections of population choose to ignore it. So again here he is asking for the logical and rational message. Now look at the options of B, C and D. Continued state support is not talked about. Glorious art forms and traditions and continuous state support is not the issue. Household units should be modernized. That's not talked about. Handloom products to be converted to machine-made and designer to make them popular. No, that's not the problem here. He's talking about freeing the handloom industry from the narrative. He's talking about the problem of narratives. So that is what the author of the passage was conveying in the passage. So A should be the answer for this question. Now, the assumptions that have been made in the passage. There is no need for the state to be involved. No, he did not say that. He did not say that state need not be involved. He did not talk about the complete divorce of the state from the handloom industry. Handloom products are no longer appealing and attractive. No, that's not an assumption that's valid with the passage. He's saying handlooms must be protected, but handlooms have certain problems linked with the narratives, and you just have to correct those narratives, and then we would see a growth in that industry. So both of them are not valid, hence the answer would be D. Yes. So here he's asking about the number of natural numbers in the first 100 numbers which are not divisible by any one of 2, 3, 5, 7 and 9. Quickly first notice that I need not worry about 9, because if I remove numbers that are divisible by 3, I am also removing numbers that are divisible by 9. So 9 is something that I will not worry about. I will only look at 2, 3, 5, 7, 5 and 7. So there are two ways to do this. One is I can first find the number of numbers that are divisible by 2, then 3, then 5, then 7. Then again I can take the number of numbers that are divisible by 2 and 3, 2 and 5, 2 and 7, 3 and 5, 3 and 7 and 5 and 7. Similarly, I can take an intersection of numbers being divisible by 3 of these given numbers, that is 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 7, 3, 5, 7 and 2, 5, 7. But that would be a lengthy process. So instead what you can do is, you can actually list down the numbers, because that is a brute force method to solve this question. But that would give an answer faster, because if you're not worrying about the numbers that are divisible by 2, that means you're only looking at the odd numbers, that is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19 and so on. Similarly, if you're smart enough, you would not write these numbers of 5 and 15, because they're divisible by 5 and you already know that. So you can list down all the numbers and you can eliminate those numbers that are divisible by, you have already eliminated 2. So you can eliminate numbers divisible by 3, 5 and 7. And you've already taken care of 2 and 5. So you just have to worry about 3 and 7. And if you're taking care of the numbers divisible by 3, you're also taking care of numbers divisible by 9. So if you carefully eliminate them and count the remaining numbers, you would get 22. So let me quickly list down those 22 numbers. Those numbers would be 1, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59, 61, 67, 71, 73, 79, 83, 89 and 97. So these are the 22 numbers that you will find that are not divisible by 2, 3, 5, 7 and 9. Okay, here again you just have to give values to x and y to get the answer. So what is the maximum value of x plus y? Maximum value of x plus y will be when you have maximum values for both x and y. So the maximum value of x plus y would be 8 plus 7, 15. To minimize the value of x minus y, what you do is take the least value possible for x and the highest value possible for y. That means 4 for x and 7 for y. So that would be minus 3, and is asking us for the ratio, that would be minus 5. And minus 5 is not there in the options. So the answer here would be D. That is none of the above. Again a question on prime numbers. There were too many questions on prime numbers. Prime numbers such that p square plus q is also a prime number that is less than 30. So we just have to find the different combinations of p and q where p square plus q is a prime number that is less than 30 and p square plus q it's a prime and also less than 30. So first of all, you know that the number of primes that are less than 30 are, the primes that are less than 30 are 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29. Now you just have to find ways in which one of these numbers could be expressed as p square plus k, where p and k are prime. So if you take multiple combinations, you'll notice that 7 can be written as 4 or 2 square plus 3. 11 can be written as 2 square plus 7. 17 can be written as 2 square plus 13. 23 can be written as 2 square plus 19, and again 11 can be written as 3 square plus 2. And these are the only combinations for p and k which would give you p square plus k being a prime number that is less than 30. So how many combinations do we have? We have 5. So the answer here would be 5. So 5 is the answer for this one. All you had to do was carefully list down the prime numbers and take various combinations of that number. Again, this is a beautiful number. This is again a magic number that we talked about in the HIR program. And you'll notice that if you carefully analyze the PYQs of the last 4 to 5 years, you'll notice that 1001 is a very, very favorite number for the examiner. He's asking us for the sets of numbers which have 3 positive integers whose LCM equals 1001 and HCF equals 1. First of all, 1001 is nothing but 7 times 13 times 7 times 11 times 13. And you just have to use these factors to make sets of numbers that have LCM of 1001 and HCF equal to 1. So these sets would be This is one set already, but instead you can also take 1. This is one another set. Here why are we taking two values equal? Because he did not say sets of distinct numbers. He said sets of numbers, 3 positive integers. He did not talk about distinct sets, distinct numbers. So we can take two values to be equal. Similarly, we can take 1, 1 and 1001. Similarly, we can take 1, 7, 1001, or 13 in place of 7, or 11 in place of 7. Similarly, we can take 7, 11 and 1001. In place of 7 and 11, I can take combinations of 7, 11 and 13. That means 7, 13, 11, 13. That are two combinations. So these are all the triplets. How many do I have? 1, that is 1 here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So more than 8, that is 9 combinations are possible to have, which have an LCM of 1001 and HCF equal to 1. Why is HCF equal to 1? Because these are prime numbers, 7, 11 and 13, and you take any set, the common factor would be 1. In all the sets that have 1, the common factor would obviously be 1, and in any set which has 7, 11 and 1001, you would notice that the common factor for any two prime numbers, that is 7 and 11, would be 1. So 1001 is one beautiful number on which questions can be framed easily, and they are being framed in the last 3 to 4 years. Again, this is also a question based on combinations of digits for P, Q, R and S and T. So here the answer would be 3. How? Let's solve it. The left hand side is 100 P plus Q plus 10Q plus R minus 10P minus S or plus S equal to 100 P plus 10P plus T. Now I'll simplify both sides. 100P on one side, 100P plus 10P on another side. So 10, I have a minus 10P. I have 10Q plus R equal to, I'll take 90P to the other side, that becomes 20P plus T. And he has given the value of 3 for Q, that means this becomes 30 plus R equal to 20P plus T. Now I just have to find R, P and T that satisfy this equation, and the extra condition that I have is T less than 6. And also all P, Q, R, S and T are distinct and non-zero. So I just have to satisfy these 3 conditions. One is distinct non-zero, one is T less than 6, and one is this equation. And also if I try to write this down in the normal subtraction format, that would be 13R, sorry, before that, now look at the left hand side. If R is a single digit, the maximum value it could have is 9. So the maximum value for LHS is 39. And if LHS can be 39 maximum, RHS cannot go beyond that, because LHS equal to RHS. So P cannot be more than 1. If P is more than 1, that is if P is 2, that would be 40 plus T. That would be beyond 39. So P should be 1. So I'll put P1 Q3 R minus 1S is equal to 1 1 T. So it's nothing but R minus S equal to T, or I should, if I subtract, if R is less than S, I'll take a carry from 3, that means this would become 2, I'll take 1 to the other side, and 1 R minus S 1r minus s equal to t, and this would become 2, 2 minus 1 becomes 1, and 1 comes down, that becomes 1 and 1 in the tens and hundreds place. So that means I need r to be less than s and 1r minus s should be t. So that is another condition that I arrived at. Now t can take values less than 6. So I'll keep giving different values for t starting from 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1, and since it is non-zero I'll not go for 0, and I will try to give values for r and s that would satisfy this equation and also this equation, that is 30 plus r is equal to 20 plus t. So if I give a value of 5 for t, I'll get a certain value for r. Okay, there was an s here, so that s, I can keep giving values for t and I'll get values for r minus s, and I can keep giving values for r and s, and I'll get multiple combinations of p, q, r, s and t, and out of those combinations I need to ensure that they are distinct. That means since I already gave values of 1 and 3 for p and q, I cannot have 1 and 3 for r, s and t. So if I satisfy all these conditions, the only numbers that are possible are s and r being, p, q, r being 1, 3, 4 minus ps is 1, 9, that will be equal to 115. 1, 3, 2 minus 17 equal to 115. 1, 3, 2 minus 18 equal to 114. So these are the only combinations that are possible that satisfy these given conditions. So the answer should be 3. Again, this is a problem that is repetitive, asked many times in CSAT. 22 and 24 it was asked. Again it's asked in 2025. Notice that you just have to break this down into sets of 6 letters each. So here A, B, dash, C, C, dash, that would be 6 letters. Again 6 letters here and 6 letters remaining. And you'll notice that every section would have 1 A, 2 B's and 3 C's. Because here we have 3 C's and here we have 2 B's and we also have 1 A here. So that has to be the pattern. We'll try to fill it accordingly. This should be B, C, B, A and C. So A, B, B, C, 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 A, B, B, C, C, C and A, B, B, C, C, C. B, C, B, A, C are the missing letters and that is given in the third option. So that is the answer for this question. Now again, this is a passage question. Let's look at the comprehension. Teaching and learning have been a forte, but the new demands of the society are, they require independent thinking. Higher education should not be a servant of policy and not a passive respondent. It's all about how to think rather than what to think. It has to be, teaching has to be reinvented. Now the central idea of the passage is being asked, India not having resources is not the problem. Institutions of higher learning should not be under the control of government, again is not the problem. The control is not being talked about. Classroom approach should be done away with. No, classrooms cannot be done away with. That's not the intent. Classroom needs to be reimagined and reinvented. Yes, that is what they're talking about. Reinvented. You can also notice that the term is exactly given in the statement. So that should be a hint for you to get the right answer here. So the answer here is the last option, that is D. Now again, the assumptions based on this question, this passage. Higher education is a constantly evolving subject that needs to align towards new developments in all spheres of education. funds or the budget or the amount of investment that's made in education is not the problem. But yes, he's talking about a constantly evolving subject, because he's saying that the future of work requires new ways of educating people. So he's talking about evolving needs, and he's also talking about developments that should be tailored according to this evolving needs. So A is valid, B is not valid. So the answer here is 1 only. Now there's another passage question. Again, let's look at the passage quickly. He's talking about population growth, greater inequality if there's inequality in growth, food production. Food is being converted from one form to another, and there's a loss of calories in that conversion, and conversion rate is given to be around 5 to 7%. So let's look at the question. It's asking for the crux. Urgent need to promote different foods in wealthier societies. No, that's not the central idea. Animal-based food is far less efficient than grain or plant-based food in terms of production. Yes, he's talking about that, but let's see the other options. Replace. Plant-based protein replacing animal-based protein is not talked about. Inequality in food production is inevitable in any fast-changing society. No. He's not saying inequality is absolutely essential, but he's only talking about animal-based food or proteins being less efficient than plant-based food. So the answer here should be B. Let's look at the question that is based on this passage again. That is the assumptions. The food manufacturing and processing industries in every country should align their opportunities according to the according to the changing needs of societies. He's not talking about the food processing industry of every country. He's just giving a general idea of how there's a loss of efficiency when food is converted from one form to another, particularly plant to animal. So this industry in every country according to the need is not an assumption that fits perfectly with the context. Wealthier societies tend to incur loss of calories, yes, due to indirect utilization. Yes, they're converting plants to animals and then consuming them. That is causing an inefficiency in the consumption patterns. Hence, that is a valid statement. So the answer should be B, 2 only. Yes, this is again a question that is very similar to finding the number of zeros in any product. Now to find the number of 35s in this product, what you need is, to make 135, you need a 7 and a 5. And you notice that there are ample number of 7s in the product. There's 1 7 here, there are 3s because this is 7 cube, there are 3 7s there. There's a 7 in 385. There's a 7 later on also in 7777. So you have ample number of 7s. All you need to do is count the number of 5s. Notice that there is 1 5 here. 5 times 77 is equal to 385. So there is 1 5 there. And this is 125 times 8. And 125 is nothing but 5 cube. So I have 1 5 in 385 and 3 5s in 1000. That makes total of 4 5s. That means I have 4 5s and I already have enough 7s. So 4 5s and 4 7s would make 4 35s. So 35 power n would be 35 power 4. So the answer should be 4 or B. Yes, again this is a sequence, a pattern that we discussed extensively in the HIR program. I asked you to remember this pattern of multiplying factors. It would be 0.5 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5 and so on. Now notice that if you multiply 0.5 here, that would be 12. 12 times 1 is 12 again. 12 times 1.5 is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. 36 times 2.5 is 90. So this is exactly the pattern of multiplying factors, and hence x should be 12. The answer here is 12. Again, this is a question that we talked about, circular tracks and moving in the opposite direction. So you have to take relative velocity or relative speed, and using that you need to find the number of times they meet. So here, if one is going at a speed of 5 rounds per hour and the other is going in the opposite direction of 3 rounds per hour, the relative velocity would become 5 plus 3, 8. So 8 rounds per hour is the relative speed of one person if you consider the other person to remain stationary. So in a span of, let's say, I'll just first take a span of 2 hours from 5 to 7 a.m. In 2 hours they would meet, since they are going at 8 rounds per hour, in 2 hours they would meet 8 times 2, that is 16 times. But the 16th time would be exactly at 7 a.m. But he is asking about the number of times between 5 and 7. So I'll remove 1 from that, that would become 15. But since he is not asking 5 a.m. but he is asking 5:20 instead, I'll try to find the number of times they meet between 5 and 5:20, and I'll subtract that from 15. So that means a time period of 20 minutes at the speed of 8 rounds per hour. So that would be 8 times 20 by 60. That would be 8 into 1 by 3, that will be 2 point something. But the number of times that they meet would be an integer, so that should be 2. So 2 times they meet between 5 and 5:20. So to get the number of times they meet between 5:20 and 7, 15 minus 2 would be equal to 13. So the answer should be 13 for this one. Again, this is a topic that is simple and that is repetitive. So a circular track, relative velocity, the number of times that they meet between any 2 points of time. Again, this is another speed and distance question that is extremely easy. All you have to do is just take the equation of speed equal to distance by time, and when a train passes any person or a pole or a tree, the distance traveled would be the length of the train. So in the first case, the length of the train, d, by the speed would be the relative velocity. The relative velocity when two people are moving in the same direction would be the difference between their velocities. Let the speed of the train be s, and the speed of first person is 3. And be very careful to convert units into, you need to bring uniformity in the units. You cannot deal with meters and kilometers per hour together. So since he's asking for the length in meters and the time is given in seconds, we'll try to convert everything into meter per second. So since this is the speed, I just have to multiply that with 5 by 18. This is equal to 8. Similarly, d by s minus 4 into 5 by 18 equal to 9. I'll try to equate, since I want s, since I want d, I will try to eliminate s. What I'll do is 18d by 8 equal to 5s minus 15. 18d by 9 equal to 5s minus 20. I'll subtract one from another. I'll get 18d by 8 minus 18d by 9 would be 18d by 72. That is equal to 5s minus 5s is 0, minus 15 minus minus 20 is 5. So d would be equal to, this is 4 times 4 into 5 is 20. So the answer should be 20. This was a simple question, but the scope for error would be in conversion of units from kmph to meter per second. If you did not convert, you would not arrive at an answer. And this is another pattern that's very repetitive. N square being a number which has 1, 2, 3 up to a certain number, and then again going in the decreasing order. So notice that 11 times 11 or 11 square is 121. 111 square is 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. And if you take 4 ones, the square would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the number of ones would give you the number at the center. So the number at the center here is 9. That means you need to have 9 ones in that number n. So it should be 9. The answer here would be 9. 9 ones, and square of that would give you this big number. So the answer here is B, that is 9. Okay, let's look at the question 41, which is a passage-based question. It's talking about countries promising to move to net zero carbon and the role of household emissions in the process of moving to net zero. He's talking about incentives that companies and governments have to give to ensure that the supply side emissions would be lower. So let's look at the statements given here. Central idea is being asked again. Moving is possible only by the reduction in household emissions? No. He's saying household emissions is a problem that has to be reduced, but that is only the problem? No, that's not the only problem. Can be brought about by incentivizing them? Yes, that looks decent, but let's see the other options as well. Cheaper goods and services can be made by using low carbon technologies. That is relevant in general context, but in the context of the passage, that's not right. Manufacturing industries that use low carbon technology should be provided with subsidies. No, subsidies for manufacturing industries is again not the idea of the passage. So the answer here should be B, that is low carbon behavior in people being brought by incentivizing them to adopt low carbon technologies. The next question is about assumptions that are made in this. Supply side investments in companies can result in low carbon behavior. People are not capable of adapting low carbon behavior without the involvement of government and companies. That is too extreme. People not capable without the support of government is too extreme. That's not an assumption that's valid with the passage also. Supply side investments in companies can result in behavior. Yes, supply side investments is being talked about. He's talking about the investments that need to go into low carbon options, and he's saying that can result in low carbon behavior. Yes, supply side emissions can go down, demand side emissions can go down with right investments in the supply side. So A is valid, that the first one is valid, so A should be the answer. Now this is another passage question. Let's read the passage quickly. 50 years, world's consumption of raw material quadrupled, 100 billion tons, less than 9% of this is reused. He's talking about recycling and reusing. Automotives have minerals that are important, and reusing makes sense because the ingredients can be recovered and they can be put into new batteries. Now he's again asking for the central idea. The first statement, green economy is not possible without reusing critical minerals. No, green economy not being possible is not the central idea. He's simply saying recycling should be done. He's not talking about not being possible. Every sector should adapt the reuse immediately. No, he's not talking about sectors. is only talking about the power of reusing and recycling, but not every sector. Sector specific aspects are not being talked about. Circular economy can be beneficial for sustainable growth. This sounds reasonable according to the context. Circular use of material resources is the only option for some industries. Again, industries is not the problem, and only option is not the central idea. So here the answer is C. Let's look at the next question based on the same passage. Again, it is assumptions. Automobile factories are examples of circular economy. No, he's not talking about example, any particular example of circular economy. He's saying automobiles do have certain minerals that can be recycled. So this is not an assumption that fits well with the context of the passage. Economic growth is compatible with the circular use of mineral resources. Yes, this is an assumption that is valid. Economic growth, he did talk about economic growth because he's talking about the advantages that you have when you recycle materials, and he's saying that is compatible with the circular use of mineral resources. So second is right and one is wrong, that is B. B is the right option. Let's move on to the next one. Again, this is a very easy question based on time and work. Notice that UPSC, the examiner, had gone back to simpler topics like speed and distance, circular tracks and relative velocity, time and work, calendars, sequences and series. Earlier there was a higher weightage of topics like permutations and combinations, and you do not see any such questions in the paper of 2025. Okay, let's see this question. X is a set of 20 pipes. It takes 14 minutes to fill 17%. So that means to fill the entire tank, how much would it take? 20 minutes. What about Y? 3 by 8 in 6 minutes. That means 16 minutes to fill the entire tank. What about Z? 16 pipes can empty half of the tank in 20 minutes. So totally it would take 40 minutes. Now, if you have half of the pipes of X closed, that means instead of 20 minutes, they'll take 40 minutes to fill the tank. If half of Y are open or the half are closed, it would take 32 minutes to fill the tank. It would be twice of 16. And all the pipes of Z are open. Which means for every 1 minute, half pipes of X can fill 1/40th of the tank. Y can fill 1/32th of the tank, and Z would empty 1/40th of the tank. So when all of them are operating together, this is the amount that gets filled. And notice that these two are equal. That means 1/32th of the tank gets filled in 1 minute. So to fill the entire tank, you would need 32 minutes. But since he's asking only for 50% of the tank, you just need 16 minutes. 16 minutes is enough given this condition. Yes, this again is a very easy question, but looks like a tough question because it is framed in a way that looks a little scary. 1 per n, 2 per n, which is divided by 4. But try to give values to n. You'll see that since n is a natural number and natural numbers start with 1, if you give n equal to 1, 1 per n plus 2 per n would be 3, and this when divided by 4 would give a remainder of 3. Now we take n equal to 2, 1 per n plus 2 per n would be 1 plus 2 square, that is 5, and the remainder would be, remainder when divided by 4 would be 1. You take n equal to 3, again it would be 1 plus 2 cube, that would be 9, and the remainder would be 1. And you'll notice that you take any value for n that is higher than, that is greater than or equal to 2, that would be nothing but 1 plus a multiple of 4. So whenever you divide that, you'll always get a remainder of 1. So 3 and 1 are the only two distinct values of such remainders. So how many such remainders are there? 2 such remainders are there. That is 3 and 1. So the answer should be 2 or C here. Again, this is based on one of the favorite numbers of the examiner. This number has been used many times in framing questions. P equal to Q. Or if I take Q equal to 1, P equal to 1. This is nothing but 3 times 37. And you'll notice that 481 is also a multiple of 37. That is nothing but 37 into 30. Remembering 37 here, 37 as the favorite number, that itself will give you the answer within 1 minute and you would get 2.5 marks straight away. So you know that any number Q would be divisible by 37 and 481 is also divisible by 37. So the factor that's common to both P and 481 would be 37. So the answer should be 37. You cannot have 481 because 111 is not divisible by 481, which means every Q would not be divisible by 481. So the highest common factor cannot be 481 and it could be 37 only, and hence the answer is 37. And 37 is a favorite number. We have discussed many such favorite numbers in the class, and if you knew that 37, you could straight away go for the answer. But even if you were to verify it, it would not take more than a few seconds. Now this again is a question that's similar to page numbers or listing numbers. So he's starting with single digit numbers, then double digit numbers, and then 3-digit numbers. So how many single digit numbers do you have? 9. Then how many double digit numbers would you have? From 10 to 99, that would be 90. 90 2-digit numbers, 9 1-digit numbers. So 9 digits here, 180 digits here. And now you just have 3-digit numbers that follow this. But you've already used up 9 plus 180, that is 189 digits. Out of 489, 189 are over. You're left with 300. And these 300 digits come from 3-digit numbers. That means you just need 100. 300 by 3, 100 3-digit numbers. And 3-digit numbers start from 100. And the 100th 3-digit number would be nothing but 199. And 9 would be the last digit in that number. So the answer here should be D. D, that is 9. Yes, this is again a new question. So if you were to take hints from any question paper, any previous year question paper, you need to observe patterns like this. Here you will notice that this is one new question that was introduced in the 2025 paper. So you can expect to see more such questions in the following years. We have done such similar analysis of patterns. We have identified many such questions. In fact, if you look at the papers of GS also, you would notice that some patterns were introduced in 2024, like the 3-statement questions, and many questions of that pattern came in the 2025 paper. Similarly, you will see patterns in CSAT as well that can get repeated in subsequent years. So this is one such pattern. Questioning a set of 3 people where only one of them is guilty and the other 2 are innocent. So let's say if P is guilty, the other 2 are innocent, which means P is lying always, everything that he says is a lie, and the other 2 are saying nothing but the truth. So here if I can take 3 combinations, either P is guilty or Q is guilty or R is guilty, and I can verify which one gives me the most consistency, and That would be the answer. So let's go for the first one. Let's see if P is guilty or not. Let's say P is guilty and the other two are innocent. If P is guilty, then P is lying. If he's saying I did not steal and Q stole it, that if both of them are wrong, that means P stole and Q did not steal. Now Q and R should be telling the truth. Q is saying R did not steal, which means R did not steal and I did not steal. He did not steal. And R is saying I did not steal, yes, and he does not know who did it. So if I take the case of P being guilty and the other two being innocent and telling the truth, that is consistent. There are no flaws in the logic, which means P is actually guilty. You can take the other two cases where Q and R are guilty separately, and if you look at the statements and take the opposite if they're telling the lie and take it as it is if they're saying the truth, then you will see that those two cases would not give you consistency. The only thing that is consistent is this case where P is guilty and Q and R are innocent. So the answer here would be P. P is actually the thief who has stolen the mobile phone. So here, this again is a new pattern. This was actually used, this way of, this method of asking questions was used in 23 or 24, where you need to figure out the number of matches between 2 or 3 people to get to a points table. So here you have 3 teams playing against each other, which means you have 3 matches, PQ, QR and PR. Now P, Q and R are winning 3, 2 and 1 point, which means P has to have 1 win plus 1 draw. Q must have, he has 2 points, he could have 1 win plus 1 loss, or he could have 1 draw plus another draw. Similarly R, he has 1 point, which means he could have 1 draw plus 1 loss. There is no other way he can have 1 point. He needs to have 1 draw and 1 loss. So these are the various cases. Now if I consider this one for Q, which means 1 win, 1 loss, and P has to win once and draw once. Similarly R has to lose once and draw once. So if let's say the match between P and Q ends up in P winning. So here P wins and Q loses. So P gets 2 points and Q loses. So Q does not get anything. So which means P and R should draw against each other. So here they are not getting any point. And Q has to win once and R is losing once. So Q and R should result in Q winning and R losing. That means Q gets 2 points here and R does not get any point. And since P and R are drawing, they'll get 1 point each. But that results in Q getting more points. Yes, Q is still getting 2 points. But now let's look at the number of goals that each team makes. The condition that's imposed on number of goals is each team makes exactly 1 goal. So let's look at the possible scores here. If P and Q, in the match P and Q, if P is winning, let's say the score is 1-0 because P has to score 1 goal and each team scored exactly 1 goal. And if Q and R, in which Q has to win, so Q has to score 1 goal and R would not score any goal at all. And now P and Q have exhausted their quota of 1 goal. So they're not left with any goals. So here P cannot score any goal. That means R would also score 0. But R has not scored a single goal at all. That means R did not finish his quota of 1 goal. So this case is not possible. So let's go to the second case, that is 1 draw and 1 draw, which means Q draws with P, Q draws with R also, which means in this game between P and Q, both are drawing, both neither of them won, and similarly Q and R in this game also it results in a draw, which means the score should be equal in these two PQ and QR games, and in the game of PR, P should win. So let's say P has 1 goal in that game and R has 0. So now P has exhausted his quota, which means here he'll have 0, and hence Q will also have 0 here. But Q and R both did not finish their quota of 1 goal. So here this draw should be 1-1. So this is the condition in which everything given in the question statement is valid. Now let's look at the statements. The result of the match between P and Q is a draw with 0-0. That's right. The number of goals scored by R against Q is 1. Yes. Hence both the statements are right. Here you just have to carefully list down the possibilities and ensure that all the teams get 1 goal each. Now again, this is a passage based question. Let's quickly look at it. It's hard to predict changes of climate, agricultural diseases based on atmosphere's chemistry, risk that changes would spread to all climatic zones, high value crops, selective breeding is happening, they're losing out on genetic variations due to which certain diseases are possible. So what is being asked in this question? That is central idea. Now let's look at each statement. Global climate change adversely affects the productivity of crops. No, he's not talking about the productivity of crops. Our total dependence on genetically honed crops entails possible food security. That is valid, because he's saying when we are depending on genetically honed crops, there is a problem of having other diseases which can impact the food security. Now the third statement, our food security should not depend on agricultural productivity alone. No, food security is not being talked about. He's saying the loss of genetic diversity which could result in newer problems. Genetically honed crops should be replaced with wild varieties. No, wild varieties and being replaced, that's not talked about. So A, C and D do not fit well with the context of the passage, and B is the only one that explains what is given in the passage. So the answer is B. Now the assumptions that are made for this one. Global climate change can result in migration of several plant diseases to new areas. Yes, he talked about that. He talked about climatic zones, these diseases spreading to newer climatic zones. He did talk about that, and that's very valid with respect to the passage. Scientific understanding of the wild relatives would enable us to strengthen food security. Yes, he talked about the problems that could arise if our agricultural species are very different from wild varieties. So if you can understand the wild varieties and the changes that adaptations that these wild varieties are doing, then you can also introduce them into your current species, and that will help you have a better food security without facing the newer problems of different infections spreading to all climatic zones. So both of them are valid according to the passage. So the answer here should be C. A good statesman, like any other sensible human being, learns more from his opponents. He's talking about having an opposition because friends would always be saying good things, but opposition would also give us the right direction because they'll help you have a reason and good sense. So you need to be having both friends and opposition. Now let's look at the statements without the opposition. Without opposition parties, administration gets to become more responsible. No, he's saying opposition is needed. He's talking about opposition. He's saying both opposition and friends are needed. So this is not true. Democracy needs to have revolutionaries. Revolutionaries is just too much to talk about. To keep the government alert, no. He's just saying a decent opposition is needed to help you have better reason and good sense. Rulers in a democracy need the support of opposition for survival. No, survival, this is not a question of survival. It's just saying that a balanced opposition is needed. And is exactly saying that in the fourth statement. Balance of political power and good governance is essential for a democracy. Indispensable, essential for a opposition is essential. So fourth statement is valid according to the context of the passage. So the answer here is D. Now the assumptions that were made in a democracy, a strong opposition is required only if the head of the government is indifferent. Head of the government is indifferent, only then having assumption is not. It's not the assumption. It's not a valid assumption because he's not saying the characteristics of the head of the government or the need of the opposition based on the head of the government. So this is wrong. The more aggressive the opposition, the better is the governance. No. The more balanced is the opposition, the better is the governance. Could have been a better statement here, but this is too much. So this is also wrong. So the answer here is neither 1 nor 2. Okay, again this is a blood relations based question. So here you just have to be careful and list down the family tree. P is the brother of Q, which means P is male. Q and R are his siblings. S is R's mother, which means S is the mother of P, Q and R. T is P's father, which means T is a male and he is father of P, Q and R, which means T and S should be father and mother or a couple. Okay, now how many of them are definitely true? S and T are a couple is true. Q is T's son cannot be true because Q could be either a male or a female, a son or a daughter. T is Q's father is true. S is P's mother. Yes, S is P's mother, true. R is T's daughter. No, we cannot say that because we do not know the gender of R. P is S's son. Yes, because P is male, so he should be a son and S is the mother. So P is S's son. So only 4 are correct in this question. Okay, this again is a very easy question, and if you were to remember the numbers associated with letters of the English alphabet, we had to remember these 5 letters and give numbers to them: 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25. Based on that we can get numbers for these letters N, O, T, E, S. N and O is, N would be before O, so N would be 14 and 15 and the product is nothing but 210. Now T is nothing but 20. 210 times 20 equals to 4,200. Now E is 5, so 4,200 times 5 is equal to 21,000. And S is nothing but, it would be 19. So you just have to multiply 21,000 with 19. That will be nothing but 3,99,000. So the answer here would be A. That is 3,99,000. Again, this is a very easy question. You just have to map letters with the numbers that are given. F is for 6, R is 5, A is 4, N is 3, C is 2, and so on. Similarly, from Germany, you will get the corresponding numbers for each letter. So we just have to identify Y in these. Y stands for 7. E stands for 1. M is the fourth letter here. The fourth number here is 8. Again E was 1. And N is nothing but the last but one letter here, that is 3. 71813 should be the answer. This was an extremely easy question. So it boils down to that, trying to find easy questions in the paper, solving them, getting past the cutoff. And what is the cutoff for CSAT paper? Should I predict the cutoff for CSAT paper? The cutoff for CSAT paper is always the same. It is 66 marks or 1/3 of the total marks, that is 200 by 3. So you just need to get 66. That means not many questions. It's in fact very easy to get 66 only if you prepare well firstly and have the right strategy in the exam hall and also implement it. And if you're not calm and composed, that also will be a problem. So remaining calm and composed is also a very important part of the exam hall strategy. So this is a 5-digit number, P, Q, R, S and T. P is thrice of T, 3T. Q, S is greater than Q by 4. S, P, Q, R, S is greater than Q by 4. We have T. R, Q is greater than R by 3, which means Q equal to R plus 3 or R equal to Q minus 3. So now I have to give values for Q and T such that I get distinct digits in these three places, and also T cannot be equal to 0. I'll first try to figure out Q because I'll easily get 3 digits based on Q alone. So let me figure out Q, and Q minus 3 has to be greater than or equal to 0. So I'll start with 3 here, then this would be 0, this would be 7, 4, 1, 8, 5, 5 minus 3 is 2, 5 plus 4 is 9. I cannot go beyond that because 6 plus 4 becomes 10. So these three are possibilities. Now in the first case, if 3, 0, 7 are cannot be repeated, I am left with what digits? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8 and 9. I need to have T and 3T, which means the first digit should be a multiple of the last digit, and that is 3 times of it. So I can only have a combination of 2 and 6 here. This would be 6 and this would be 2. In the second case, what are the digits I am left with? 2, 3, 4, 4 is over, 5, 6, 7 and 9. So here I can have 3 and 6, and there is no other way to 2 and 6. This would be 6 and this would be 2. Now for the last one, 5, 2 and 9, I am left with 1, 3, 4, 6, 7 and 8. Digits 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9. And I've taken the case of 2 and 6 with digits 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9. And I've taken the case of 2 and 6. I can also have 3 and 9. So I can have 4, 1, 8 for the middle digits, and I can have 9 and 3. So totally I have 4 possibilities which satisfy the conditions given in the question. Okay, this is again a time and work question, and it's extremely easy. Let's quickly put that statements into number format. X can complete 1/3 of a certain work in 6 days, which means he can finish the entire work in 18 days. And Y can finish 1/3 in 8 days, which means he can finish the entire thing in 24 days. Z finishes 3/4 in 12. So it takes 16 days totally to finish the entire work. Now all of them are working together for n days. So if they were working together for 1 day, the amount of work that gets finished is 1 by 18 plus 1 by 24 plus 1 by 16. That equals to 23 by 144. And if they're working for n days, 23n by 144 amount of work gets finished. And if I take 1 as the total unit of work, the amount of work that is left is 1 minus 23n by 144, and that is finished by Y in 8 2 by 3 days. Y finishes 1 by 24th of the work in 1 day, and if he's taking 8 2 by 3, 8 3s are 24 plus 2 26, 26 by 3. That is the number of days and amount of work done every day. So this is the equation that you get based on the information given in the question. And if you solve for that, you get a value of 4 for n. So the answer here is 4. Again, this is a very easy sequence question. You notice that the difference here is 2, 3, 5, 7. These are nothing but prime numbers. He has used prime numbers for solving many questions in this paper. So the next prime number would be 11. So 18 plus 11 would be 29. And the next one would be, next prime would be 13. 29 plus 13 is indeed 42. So the answer here is 29. Okay, let's read the passage. No democracy that has grown economically without corporate capitalism. Transition, it helped in transition and generating jobs, and big companies operate on large scale, and they create welfare for marginalized and level playing field, because they're also creating revenues for the state. So let's read the statements. He's asking for the critical message. Corporate capitalism is important for economic growth of a state and also democracy. It's imperative for a modern state to achieve its political objectives. Political objectives is not talked about. Political objectives is not there in the passage. No state can ensure its economic survival without the corporate. No, he's not saying that. He's saying only corporate capitalism is beneficial, but he's not saying that it's the only thing that's needed. Corporate capitalism and democracy have mutual dependence for their continued existence. No. In fact, he's also saying democracies can exist without corporate capitalism. He's saying if they have corporate capitalism, that could be helpful. That's it. So A is the only thing that actually gives the summary of the passage. Corporate capitalism is important for economic growth and also for the democracy. Let's look at the next question. He's asking for the assumptions that were made on the that are valid with the passage. Corporate capitalism promotes the growth of labor force and provides more employment opportunities. Yes, he did talk about that. He talked about welfare and opportunities here. Poor and marginalized sections of population are benefited by corporate capitalism due to trickle down. Yes, he said that. He talked about poor and marginalized sections, creating more level playing field by creating opportunities, and also the revenues for the state that get created, they get transferred to these poor and marginalized sections in the form of welfare schemes. So he said this is also there. So both of them are right. Now this is a very, very short passage, in fact one line passage. So you can expect to see more of these one line passages later in the next year, in the subsequent years. A network of voluntary associations stands as a buffer between relatively powerless individual and the potentially powerful state. So he's talking about voluntary organizations being a bridge between people and state, and there's a difference of power between both these entities. Best explanation is inability of the state to enforce its will in practice against the opposition of certain groups. No inability and will of the state is not talked about. Cooperative organization for the promotion of well-being and development of personality of its members. No. He's talking about the general people, the public, an individual of the state. It takes individuals out of a state of isolation and gives them a chance to participate in common endeavor. Okay, that does not seem too vague, but let's look at the last one also. It permits citizens to have a variety of loyalties. Loyalties is not talked about. He's just saying voluntary organizations become a bridge between people and the state. So C option is close to what is being talked about. Individuals are taken out of a state of isolation because they need to have a voice, and these voluntary organizations become that voice, and they become a bridge between people and the state. Okay, so this again, you just need to give values that satisfy the given statements, and if they satisfy, then that is right, otherwise it's not. So here is saying there exists a natural number which increased by 50%. Let's take 2. 50% of this is 1. So 2 becomes 3. The factors of 2 are 1 and 2. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Both are prime. The number of factors remain unchanged. That is 2 in both the cases. Now let's take 2 again and increase it with 150%. 150% of 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5, which is again a prime. The number of factors here are 2, and here also it is 2. So the number of factors is 2 in both the cases, and which is unchanged. So both of them are right, and hence the answer should be C. Okay, here you need to carefully draw the diagram to connect all these places. A is 6 kilometers south of B. This is A. This is B, this is 6. A is 10 kilometers to the west of C. C, 10 km. D is 5 kilometers to the east of E. D is 5 kilometers to the east of E. That I will draw later because I do not have D and E here. C is 6 kilometers north of D. Okay, C is 6 kilometers north of D. Now I will try to draw that. D is 5 kilometers to the east of E. So here I have E somewhere, and D is 5 km to the east. Now F is 9 km to the west of B. So this is F and 9 kilometers. F is 12 kilometers north of G. So F is 12 kilometers north, and this is 6 and this is 6, which means G, E and D should be in the same line. Now this is the diagram. This is how the cities are located. Now I just have to calculate the distance between D and F. D and F, so D to C is 6, C to A is 10, A to B is 6, and B to F is 9. So that is 31. So the answer here is 31. 31 kilometers is the distance between the two cities D and F. 64 is written as 343. 64 is nothing but 8 square, that is written as 343, that is okay, this is 4 cube, that is written as 7 cube. Similarly, 216 is 6 cube, that is written as 9 cube. So he's taking cube of one number, adding 3 to it and taking the cube of that number. So 5 and 2 is nothing but 8 cube, that will become 8 plus 3 11, 11 cube, and 11 cube is nothing but 1331. So the answer here was B. Now this again, when divided by 6, you need to get the remainder for this very big number. But here notice that this is nothing but a sum of a geometric progression. So we'll try to figure it out. But first, if I were to take the individual remainders of each of them, if I take the remainder of 9 cube when divided by 6, it is nothing but the remainder I get when I divide 3 cube with 6, because the remainder of 9 when divided with 6 is 3. So similarly, for this it would be 3 power 4, 3 power 5, 3 power 6 and 3 power 100. So instead of worrying about this sum of 9 powers, I will worry about this sum of 3 powers. Now I know that in geometric progression the sum is a into r power, here r is 3, and the number of terms that I have is 100 minus 2, that is 98, minus 1 divided by r minus 1, that is 2. Now I am dividing this with 6. I will see that I have a 3, I already have a 3, and if I can extract a 2 here, that would become 3 into 2, 6. So I'll have a 6 and 6 and 6 get cancelled out, so that the remainder should be 0. So I'll see if I can get a 2 here, but I also have a 2 in the denominator, which means I need to have an extra 2 in that second part. That means I need to have a 4 in this number. If I have a 4 there, I can cancel out 1, 2 here. I'll have a 2 remaining. I have a 3 here. I'll take that 2 and 3. I'll make it a 6, and it will be exactly divisible by 6. So all I have to do is I have to check if 3 power 98 is minus 1 is divisible by 4. Now let's take 3 square. The remainder when I divide that with 4 is plus 1. Now I can raise this to the power of 49 here, that will still be 1, and I am subtracting 1, that means 3 power 98 minus 1, the remainder would be 1 minus 1, that is equal to 0. So this is nothing but a product of a multiple of 4. So 3 power 98 minus 1 can be written as 4 into some number k. I have a 2 here. Now I can take 1 3 from this, 1 3 from this, and that becomes 6 into some other number. Let me call that a. So here I'll notice that that is nothing but a multiple of 6. So if I divide that with 6, the remainder should be 0. Okay, here again this is another pattern of asking questions. Earlier it was slightly different. He would give 2 statements, and he would the fourth option would be different. But here the fourth option is newer, so we can expect more questions of this sort later on. Anyway, let's look at the question. He is asking what is the smallest one-digit number having exactly 4 distinct factors. 1 does not have 4, 2 does not have 4 factors, 3 does not have 4 factors, 4 has only 3 factors, 5 has only 2 factors. 6 is the smallest number which has 4 factors. They are 1, 2, 3 and 6. So 6 is the smallest one-digit number which has 4 distinct factors. Now statement 1, 2 is one of the factors. He is saying 2 is one of the factors. Now one-digit numbers which have 2 as a factor are 2, 4, 6 and 8. Just by using this data, I cannot arrive at 6 as the number. 3 is one of the factors. Again, 3, 6 and 9 are possible, but still I cannot arrive at 6. I still have to do extra work to understand what is that number that has exactly 4 distinct factors. But even without knowing these two, I could still figure out that 6 was actually the number that was needed. Which means the question can be answered even without using any of the statements. So that is new, and that is also the answer here. Again, this is a question based on digits of a number. P, Q, R and S are non-zero digits. P multiplied by PQ is RRSS, where P is less than or equal to 3 and Q is less than or equal to 4. Now, what I can do is PP is nothing but 10P plus P. PQ is nothing but 10P plus Q. That is equal to 1000 R plus 100 R plus 10 S plus S. If I write it 11P times 10P plus Q equal to, I take 100 R plus S. So this is the equation. I can take out 11 on both sides. So P times 10P plus Q equal to 100 R plus S. Now if R and S are non-zero digits, the least value, the minimum value I get here is 101. And here I need to have LHS equal to 101. And if I'm taking, and if P has to be less than or equal to 3, P can be what? 1, 2 and 3. If I take 1 and 2 for P, the maximum value I get here would be 10P plus Q. Q's maximum value is 4. 10 plus 4 would be 14. So 14 in the first case. 24 times 2, 48. 48 in the second case. So both of them would be ruled out because the minimum value I get here in the RHS itself is 101. So I rule out 1 and 2 for P, which means P has to be 3. Now what about Q? If P is 3, 3 times 30 plus Q equals to 100 R plus S. In other words, this is nothing but 90 plus 3Q equal to 100 R plus S. Now if I take values of Q equal to 1, 2 and 3, the maximum I get here is 99, which is still less than the minimum of RHS, that is 101. So Q cannot be 1, 2 and 3. Q can only take the value of 4. So 90 plus 3 into 4, that is 12. That becomes 102. And 102 means R should be 1 and S should be 2. So without using the statements also, I could arrive at the values of P, Q, R and S. I already got the values of P, Q and R and S without using any of the statements. So this question can be answered without using any of the statements is the answer here. And even if you were to use the statements along with the question, that would give you the answer. But again, you did not need any of the statements. So the answer here is D again. Now this is again based on family relations. So he's asking for the relation between Q and P. He's saying P has two sisters, R and S. So P is the sibling of R and S, but both R and S are females. R is, so using statement 1 alone, I could not establish the relation between P and Q. Now let's look at the statement, second statement. R's father is the brother of Q. R's father, R has a father who is Q's brother. Now using this alone also I cannot establish the relation between Q and P. Now let's use both the statements together. R's father is a brother of Q. Now I know that P and Q are related either in an uncle niece nephew relation or an aunt niece nephew relation, which means I can establish the relation between Q and P using both the statements together. But I do not know the gender of Q and R, which means I do not know if Q is the aunt or uncle, P is the niece or nephew. That means I can still not establish the exact relation between P and Q, apart from the fact that I know that they belong to two generations, but I do not know if they are aunt and uncle or aunt and niece or nephew. So that means I cannot answer the question even using both the statements. Okay, this is a passage based question. Inflation, aggregate of commodities, but commodities consumed are different. Services are included in CPI. Weights of production are used. Middle classes and rich classes consume differently, and a composite index is needed. So what is the logical message? We must use exclusively WPI? No. Present calculation does not correctly measure price rise of individual commodity? Yes. Okay. Inflation data underrepresents services in the consumption basket? No. We did not talk about underrepresentation of anything. We just know that different people consume differently. Now, knowledge of inflation is not really of any use. No. If that was the case, we would not be talking about anything in the passage. So this is also wrong. This is wrong and this is wrong. So this one was the right answer. Okay, trust stands commonly defined as being vulnerable to others. Entrepreneurship and trust together, globalizing behavior in a global market, holding others in good esteem, and optimism. Then they will be competent in certain aspects. Okay. So trustworthiness cannot be expected in entrepreneurship. No. Trustworthy people are the most vulnerable people. No, he did not talk about vulnerability of people, but he said you can be vulnerable to others. That's when trust occurs. No economic activity is possible without being exposed to betrayal. No, he said entrepreneurship stands on trust, but no, not betrayal. Trust is important, though it entails risk. Yes, trust helps build entrepreneurial ability, but it also has its own risk of vulnerabilities. So D should be the answer here. Okay, this question, a football match. So now, before 10 minutes, P was 3 goals behind Q, which means P had Q minus 3 goals while Q had Q goals. Or let's just say X minus 3 and X. P had X minus 3 goals and Q had X goals. Now let's read the statements. Team P scored 4 goals in the last 10 minutes. Now this would become X plus 1. But what about Q? We don't know if Q scored more goals or not. So using statement 1 alone, you cannot say if P won the match or not. Team Q scored a total of 4 goals in the match. Is that more than X plus 1? You do not know. So using statement 2 alone also you cannot answer, because you just know that it has scored 4 goals totally. But is that 4 greater than P score? We do not know. And if I were to use both the statements together, Team P scored 4 goals in the last 10 minutes. And let's say Q score, now new score became Y after including the goals scored in the last 10 minutes. He's saying Y equals to 4. But what about the relation between X plus 1 and Y? I do not know. I cannot establish that relation between X and Y or X plus 1 and Y. So I do not know who won the match even after using both the statements together, which means the answer here should be D. Using both the statements also, I could not arrive at an answer. Okay, this is a very easy question. This is nothing but p square plus q square plus 2pq minus 4pq. That becomes p square plus q square minus, this becomes minus 2pq. That is equal to p minus q whole square. And we know that p minus q whole square is greater than or equal to 0. It's always greater than 0 if p and q are not equal, and if p and q are equal, it would be equal to 0. So if statement 1 was to be considered, he said p is less than q, then it would be only greater than 0 or positive. And if I take statement 2 alone, p greater than q, it would still be greater than 0 and not equal to 0. So that value would be positive in statements 1 and 2 alone. So either of the statements is giving me the answer, and even if I use both the statements also, it will give me the answer. And what is the option that fits well? The question can be answered by using either of the statement alone. So the answer is B. Okay. There are totally 37 runs scored by 3 players X, Y and Z. The ratio of scores are same, that is X plus Y plus Z equal to 37 and X by Y equal to Y by Z. Now he is asking for the values of runs scored by X, Y and Z. Now can we find out the distinct values of these scores? We can, and that triplet would be, one way to have this is 9, 12 and 16, and the other way would be 16, 12 and 9. If you notice, the sum would be 37 and the ratio between X and Y and Z would be same in both the cases. But in the first case, value 1 is less than value 2 is less than value 3. In the second case, value 3 is less than value 2 is less than value 1. So you cannot say with certainty that there exists an ascending order or a descending order between these values, which means you cannot determine what is the relation between these three values using the given data. So the answer here should be D. That is, cannot be determined. Yes, he is talking about p plus q equal to 10 and is asking for the maximum value of p and q. And like we discussed earlier, the maximum value of product of two numbers would be equal when both the numbers are equal, and since the sum is 10 here, they should be equal to 5. So the maximum value here would be 25. So the value 1 is 25. Now again the maximum value, but only that p is greater than or equal to minus 6, q is greater than or equal to minus 4. Even in this case, you can take 5 and 5 to get 25, and both 5 and 5 fit this description. So the value 2 is also 25, which means value 1 equal to value 2 is the answer here. Now he is talking about a set of 11 numbers, and if their consecutive integers greater than or equal to minus 5, what is the minimum value of average? These are the 11 consecutive integers starting from minus 5, and you know that the average of such 11 consecutive numbers would be the middle number, and the middle number here is 0. So the minimum value of the average is 0. Now what is the minimum value of the products of a set when there are consecutive non-negative integers. He's saying non-negative, which means I could include a 0 and consecutive integers up to 10. And what is the value of the product of these numbers? Since I have a 0, the product is nothing but 0. The product is 0, which means the value 1 is equal to value 2, and hence the answer is C again. Now this again is a question on averages. So it's going back to the simpler and easier topics of quant and reasoning. And averages is something that was not asked very recently, but he has asked it in 2025 paper. So he's saying the average of P, Q and R is K. That means P plus Q plus R is equal to 3K. P is much more than the average as Q is less than the average, which means P plus Q equal to 2K. I put this back in the first equation, I'll get R equal to K. So the answer is A. Now this question, here you just have to be careful. You can either give values or you just have to take terms on one side to another and examine them. So let's take the first one, x square. First of all, he says that x belongs to, or he says 0 is less than x less than 1. Now he's saying x square greater than x cube. If I take x square to the other side, x cube minus x square, that should be less than 0. Is this true or not? We have to check for that. Now let me take x square into x minus 1. Is it less than 0 or not? Now I know that x square will always be positive. So I know that this is positive. And since x is less than 1, x minus 1 should be negative. Think about 0.5. 0.5 minus 1 would be minus 0.5. So this is negative. If this is negative, the product of positive and negative is negative, which means it is less than 0. So this is valid. Now let's look at the second one. I'll square terms on both sides. X square minus x. Is it greater than 0 or not? I'll take x out, x minus 1. Is this greater than 0 or not? I know that x is positive because it's between 0 and 1. Now I need to check for x minus 1. I know that x minus 1 would be negative because x is less than 1. Take a value of 0.5. 0.5 minus 1 would be minus 0.5. So this is negative. A product of positive and negative would be negative. So it cannot be greater than 0. So this is wrong and only 1 is right. So the answer here was A. Okay. The difference between any two natural numbers is 10. What can be said about the natural numbers which are divisible by 5 and lie between these two numbers? So let me take two sets of numbers. One is 5 and 15. The difference between them is 10, and between them 10 is one number which is divisible by 5. I'll take another set 1 and 11. The difference between them is 10 again, and the number of numbers that are divisible by 5 between these two numbers are 5 and 10. So I have either one number that is divisible by 5 or I have two numbers that are divisible by 5, which means there can be more than one such number is the valid option, because there is only one such would be wrong in this case, only two such numbers would be wrong in this case, and no such numbers would be wrong in both the cases. Hence C is the only option that is valid for all the cases. There can be more than one such number. So C should be the answer. So this is the solution for the CSAT paper of 2025. Now the level of toughness, yes, it was moderately tough, but I would not say that it was not manageable. It was certainly manageable. It was manageable if you understood the patterns of the previous year papers, if you did all the topics right, and if you also revised all the topics, practiced enough, and also written enough mock tests to have a proper strategy that could be implemented in the exam hall. And we have done all of this as a package in our high impact revision program, and these patterns and pattern analysis is something that we can do out of experience, and that was delivered and that was presented in a format that could easily be understood and replicated in the exam hall. So CSAT, again, as I said earlier, it boils down to having the right knowledge, having the right strategy, and also having the right mindset. All of these can be cultivated, and if you cultivate that, 66 I think is it's an easy, extremely easy target to achieve in the CSAT paper, and you would never have to worry about CSAT being a barrier for between you and mains. I hope that this was useful in understanding the paper of 2025, the paper 2 of 2025, and we'll also be looking at more such patterns and questions in the future. Thank you very much. Now that we discussed the analysis of the CSAT paper, if you are scoring decently on both the papers, GS and CSAT, you should start with mains preparation right away. And to help you with the mains preparation, R.C.Reddy IAS Study Circle is coming with two programs. One is the strategic revision for UPSC CSE Mains 2025. And who should be taking this program? Ideally, it should be those people who are confident of clearing prelims 2025. Or you could be a first timer. You could be writing your mains for the first time, or you could be writing mains. You could have written mains earlier, or you could be an interview appeared candidate who is trying to improve the score in mains to get a rank, or to improve your rank to get a better service or a better cadre. And if you're confident of clearing prelims in 2025, you must enroll for this program. And how is this program structured is, firstly you'll have revision classes where you'll be focusing on all the topics in the syllabus that are listed by the UPSC, and you'll be revising all of them in your revision classes. And then you'll be given notes which include notes on all the topics that are discussed, and also value addition that can enrich your answers so that you get better reward for your responses in the exam. At the same time, that will also include current affairs, so you'll have a comprehensive package of notes that will help you write very good answers and improve your GS scores, GS and SA scores. And then you will also have an in-class answer writing practice sessions. So here you will be experiencing hand-holding, where you will be given mentorship and also guidance in terms of writing answers and fine-tuning them according to the demand of the exam, and also understanding the demand of the exam. So you'll have a one-stop solution in terms of improving your mains performance, and also getting a ticket to the interview stage, and also in fact clearing the exam finally and getting a very good service. And this will also include tests, and tests of multiple kinds. One is sectionals, to ensure that you have a strong grip of every section of the syllabus, and then you will also have full length tests that will give you a picture of writing the exam with the entire syllabus in one go. And then you will also have a simulation test which will simulate the exact situation of the exam, that is having tests in succession, that is having 2 tests per day, and that will keep you prepared for the day of the exam. And those people who have seen exam like conditions much before the exam would be better prepared than others who have not seen such conditions earlier. So that way, this ensures that you're familiar with the exam environment and exam like conditions beforehand, and you'd be prepared for any sort of problems or any sort of situations that you might face in the actual exam. And it will have mentorship, where you would be getting personal guidance as to how you need to understand your strengths and weaknesses and what are your opportunities and how you can convert these strengths into marks, and also how you can avoid these weaknesses so that you do not make mistakes in the exam. So it's a comprehensive package of all the things that you need to have a very good score in mains, and also that score that ensures a very good service in the final allotment. And then there is another program, that is the Mission Mains UPSC, and this is for those who are targeting 2026, or if someone who is not very confident with the 2025 prelims, or for those people who interviewed in 2024 or earlier and who either got a service or did not get a service, but they're aiming to get a very good service in 2026 or improve their service or improve their cadre. So it is for those candidates who are aiming 2026. So these people would have 1 year, and investing this time in the right manner would ensure that you would get the best benefit out of this investment of 1 year. So how would you do that? So firstly, you need to have a assessment of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and that will be done as the first part of this program. You will be given a personalized analysis of what your how your preparation is and what you need to do in that preparation. And then you would be undergoing a set of classes that would help you revise everything that is related to the exam for all the stages, both prelims and mains. And then again you would have notes that has all the topics included along with value addition and current affairs. And then again you will also have answer writing sessions that will be in class, where you would be guided and monitored. And then you will also have mentorship to solve all the doubts and problems that you have, and this mentorship would be a personal guidance. And then you would have test series, and before we start the test series, what we do is we have a simulation test to quickly analyze the performance of the performance of one candidate, and based on the result of that simulation test, based on how that performance is analyzed, then we go to the next stage of, we do a individual assessment, and based on that we develop a strategy for the subsequent preparation in the next coming months. And that would have well-spaced test series. That means the schedule would be properly designed to ensure that you have a revision cycle of all the topics along with constant testing of every syllabus topic. And throughout this program you would also have one-to-one mentorship that would ensure that you are always on the right track without missing your direction, and also ensuring that you are doing only that is necessary for the exam without deviating from the exam's requirement. So that would keep you completely prepared by November 2025. So this is for those people who are targeting 2026, either as your first attempt, or if you are not confident of 2025 prelims, or if you are taking a break and attempting the 2026, either to get a better rank or a better service. So this is for those candidates, and both these programs are taught by faculty who are either rankers or who have reached interview stage multiple times and who have experience of teaching all the GS topics and writing the exam multiple times. So these faculty would ensure that they know the do's and don'ts of the exam, and they know how to convert the knowledge that you have into a strategy, an executable strategy, and in fact how to execute it properly. So this can be done by those people who are experienced with the exam, that too in the recent past, and we have a very good set of people who are rankers, who have reached interview multiple times, who have written the exam multiple times, who know the demand of the exam, and who have understood how to gain knowledge and also implement that knowledge in an exam format, and which is also rewarded in terms of marks. So this will be the profile of the faculty that will be handling both these programs, and both these programs are starting on June 14th. And to help you understand better about both these programs, there is an orientation session on June 8th. And to register for this session, the orientation session, and also to know more details about both these programs, click the link that is given in the description. That will give you more details about both the programs, and enroll for the orientation and attend that to get more and more details. I hope that all of you become civil servants that would be serving this beautiful country. Thank you very much.